You know, today, the gospel reading that we just heard is a very special reading because it talks about forgiveness. And today, in our liturgical cycle, is Forgiveness Sunday, because tomorrow is the onset of Lent, the first day of Lent. So in order to fast and to embrace God during this Lenten season, we're called to first forgive, because there is no embrace of the resurrection without forgiveness. As even Christ shows us from the cross, as he's crucified, and as those stand around and look at him, he says to the Father in heaven, "Forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." So even Christ gives us the example, not only in biblical tradition, but also in his life, that in order to go into the kingdom of heaven, we must forgive. In order to let go of this world, we have to let go of the things that happen to us in this world. And that's really one of the most difficult things in our Christian path to do, is to let go of the things that really bother us, the things that weigh us down, the sins that others do towards us, and sometimes never in their lifetime ask for forgiveness from us. But Christ, again, in his beautiful life that he had on this earth, sets a bar and an example for us that is very hard to emulate. Not only was his resistance of temptation difficult for us and something we shall struggle with during this Lenten season, but also his forgiveness from the cross. For the people who were murdering him, he looks down on them and says, "God, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing." I know that each one of us in this church has either sinned against or been sinned against in the past week, in the past day, in the past hour, in the past month. It's part of the fallen nature that we live in to be in this existence with sin. However, one of the things that we're called to do on this day, right now, today, is to let go of the things that bother us that other people do. And you know, many times when we talk about forgiveness, we're so eager to have God forgive us for what we've done. And we want to go to him in private and stand in our closet and stand with an icon and say, "Lord, forgive me for the things that I've done." And we don't want anybody else to hear what those sins are. But when someone sins against us, we want it public. We want the public acknowledgement of their sin against us. I want so-and-so to come in front of me and say they're sorry for the way they treated me. Otherwise, I'm never going to talk to them again. But when it comes to us, do we do that in front of people that we've sinned against? Do we do that in front of God? Do we do that even in the sacrament of confession? No, we don't. As a model for the church, as model Christians, and as people who are sacramentally alive, we come for communion. Do we embrace confession? Not really. And it's not just this community. It's pretty much every community. It's pretty much everywhere in the world. It's not embraced because of the fact that you have to stand in front of someone and say out loud what you've done. And no one really wants to look at that and say, you know, I can do that. Or people think that the priest is going to look at them and say, "Oh, he's going to look at me differently now." Or he's going to go tell everybody. Or he's going to go tell Presbytera and go tell his kids, you know, stay away from so-and-so because they've done this or that. And that becomes our own self-created excuses for not coming into the presence of Christ through the sacrament of confession. So we want everyone to come to us. But how many of us really want to go to someone and say, "You know what? I acted like a jerk. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I wasn't considering your feelings, or I didn't think, or I underestimated how much what I said was going to hurt you. Or I didn't think, or I forgot, or I didn't appreciate the love that you gave me, and I said these things out of anger and not out of appreciation." How many of us really do that? I mean, if you do, you're on the right path. But most of us don't. And the reason for that is because it makes us feel weak when in actuality it makes us stronger. It makes us stronger as individuals for someone to say, you know what? So-and-so did this to me, and they came and said they were sorry because they understood that it was wrong. And they want to change their way of life. And they appreciate their relationship with me. And they want to make it better. But it's not only that person, it's also Christ looking at that with the same words, saying, I know that they want to make their life better. I know that they want to be closer like me, God saying that. I know that they want to change and that they don't disregard the relationship with me or what I've done for them. And I know that they want to try to be better. But for us, how many of us look at things and we say, you know what? I'm forgiven because I stand in front of my icon and I say, God, forgive me. Well, it's up for debate. Are you really forgiven? If you have wine and a piece of bread at home, is that really communion? No. You say, God, forgive me. Does he really forgive you in the sacrament that he's established for forgiveness? That's up for debate. But it's not a sacrament. And you are not guaranteed that forgiveness as you are in the sacrament of confession. You might say, God forgives me, but is it the sacrament? No, it's not. So, one thing to understand as an Orthodox Christian and as a Christian in general is you're not going to get someone to come up to you and say, you know what, I am really sorry for what I did. If you get that, that's a person you should hang on to as a friend, even though they've gone against you, even though you've had problems with them. Because they acknowledge, and it's not just now, it's the acknowledgement of where they are going, what they want out of the relationship with you, and what you want out of the relationship with them. But most of us will never have our day in court with someone who's gone against us. You just won't. And if you keep hoping for that day, you will be at the judgment seat of God, and Christ will be saying, you know what? Why were you waiting for that? Didn't I tell you to forgive? Didn't I tell you to let it go? And you know, we think about the doorway to heaven, and everyone knows the gospel reading where it says, the path is narrow and the door is narrow and we have to squeeze through. And some of the scholars say that if you have your handbags and your suitcases with all your stuff from the world, you cannot fit through the gates of the kingdom of heaven, so you have to let it go. But if you have on your back and in your arms and in your heart all the evils and the sins that have been done against you and you haven't let them go, you cannot bring that into the kingdom of heaven. It's impossible. And it's not just me saying that, but you have to look at what heaven is and who God is. God is all good. The kingdom of heaven is all good. Would any of us dare to think that in the kingdom of heaven, where God lives, where the angels are and where the saints are, that there is even 1 ounce of evil that resides in the kingdom of heaven? No one would say that. Everyone knows that that's not the truth. That where God is only good. So if only good is where God is, then how can we bring something that is evil into the kingdom of heaven? We can't. That's the problem with not forgiving. Because that lack of forgiveness is something that we carry as an evil into the kingdom of heaven, or we try to. We approach not only the sacraments, but we approach God in our relationship with God with that little hangnail of sin with us, and God says, there's no room for that in here. There's no room for evil in the kingdom of heaven. That's why I gave it to you as a sacrament, to let it go. But again, I wasn't ordained yesterday, and I wasn't born the day before yesterday. And I know that most of you in your lifetime will never, ever come for the sacrament of confession. That's statistics. It's not me. It's not me being the, I want to hear everybody's sins. Or that has nothing to do with it. The thing is, Most of you won't go because of whatever reason. You're scared, you don't know, you've never contemplated, or you think you're holy, or you think that you have it all figured out and you don't need advice from anybody. And I love talking with doctors at receptions and medical doctors and talking about people who they thought, or people who came to them and thought everything was fine. Oh, I'm perfect. I'm the bill of health. Yeah, I might be, 400 pounds, but I feel great. And my blood pressure is good. I just feel that. That's fine, yeah. And they do self-evaluations, and all of a sudden, something happens. They come to the doctor and they say, I thought everything was fine. Well, it's things like that with our spiritual life, too. We can go under the guise that look in the mirror, I'm the man, or I'm the woman, or I got it all figured out, and everybody owes me. And then we get to God, and God says, you know what? You thought you were the person underneath that was made up, when it was the actual physical makeup and the physical attributes of things that made you think that your soul could be decorated and made better, when it was actually, as the prayers say, full of rapacity. So what I ask on this day is that you, for the next few minutes, think about, and I offer this to you now because I'm not going to wait till the end of the service when everyone's here, and there's no 11th hour today of coming to embrace this. But for those who are here who have heard the gospel, and I know that you've heard the gospel, and you've heard my words today as far as about forgiveness, I'm asking you to do one thing. In a second, to kneel down and to say under your breath those things that you want to be forgiven for, the things that you've done wrong. And don't hold it back either. Don't say, well, God knows that I've done this, or He knows that I've done that. Yeah, He does. And you might know that your kids are doing something too, but unless they acknowledge it, what does it mean? You might know that a particular student is talented in math, but until they take the math test, they don't get the grade.